When Quentin died, I thought my world had ended. 38 years of marriage gone in a heartbeat. One minute we were sipping coffee in the breakfast nook, chatting about which roses to trim in the garden. And the next? Silence. Deafening. Heavy silence. The house on Elm Street. The one we bought as newlyweds. Once bursting with life and laughter, suddenly felt enormous and hollow. Every creak in the old wooden floor echoed like a ghost of his footsteps. I'd wake up each morning and, for a brief second, forget that he was gone until reality hit me like a train all over again. Tabitha, my daughter, called every day during the first 2 weeks after the funeral. Practical as always. Too practical. Really. While I was still sifting through memories and old photographs, she was already planning my next move. Mom, you need to sell the house, she told me one afternoon over the phone. It's way too big for you to handle. And expensive. I'm fine, Tabitha, I said, lying through my teeth. You should move in with us here in Sherville. We've got space. The kids would love to have their grandmother around, not just on Christmas. The thought of leaving my home, my life with Quentin, the place where we raised our children and grew old together, it physically hurt. But loneliness, that scared me more. Tabitha kept calling, gently pressing the idea. Sell the house. Save the money. Be with family. After the third call, I caved. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just clinging to a memory. Maybe I needed to move on. The house sold faster than I expected. The market was good. The realtor said, we even got above asking. I transferred the money into my account just as Tabitha advised. Seeing those numbers gave me a strange mix of comfort and guilt. Quentin and I had always lived modestly. He was a city engineer. I worked as a clerk at a construction firm. We saved where we could, scraped together enough for rainy days. And now the storm had come. The worst one of my life. I packed our world into a dozen boxes, shut the door to Elm Street for the last time, and took a leap into the unknown. A new chapter, whether I wanted it or not, had begun. Moving to Sherville felt like diving into cold water sudden. Shocking. And not entirely by choice. I'd packed up decades of memories into 12 cardboard boxes, leaving behind the soft armchair Quentin used to nap in, the bookshelves we built together, even the curtains I'd sewn with my own hands. I only kept what meant the most, my mother's mahogany chest of drawers, and Quentin's favorite rocking chair. Tabitha and her husband, Vinton, greeted me warmly when I arrived. Their 2-story suburban house was modern, bright, and spotless. Nothing like the warm, worn comfort of our old home. They'd cleared out Vinton's office on the first floor for me. You'll be more comfortable here, Mom, Tabitha said. No stairs to worry about. I didn't argue. Though at 61, I was still perfectly capable of climbing stairs. Quentin always said I had more energy than women half my age. In the beginning, things were fine. Everyone was polite. Almost overly so. I tried to be helpful. I cooked, folded laundry, picked up Jasper and Rosman from school. The kids seemed happy to have me around. Especially Rosman, my 13-year-old granddaughter, who'd often sit in my room while I knitted. We didn't even have to talk. Her presence was enough. But then the tension began quiet at first, like a draft through a cracked window. Vinton stopped talking when I walked into a room. Tabitha's smiles became tighter. Her tone clipped when I offered to help in the kitchen. Mom, I've got dinner under control, she'd say, forcing a grin. Why don't you just relax? But I didn't want to relax. I'd spent my whole life working, moving, doing. Sitting still felt like dying slowly. Still, I nodded and sat. I wasn't blind. I saw the little glances they gave each other. I noticed the silence stretching longer at dinner. I felt like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. One night, Tabitha came home and announced Vinton had gotten a promotion. They were throwing a party for his coworkers. That's great, I said. Genuinely happy. What can I do to help? Actually. She paused. Maybe visit your friend Muriel that night, just so things don't get too crowded. That stung. I nodded anyway. For the first time, I wondered had I made a mistake. The following weeks chipped away at me in quiet, invisible ways. It wasn't one big blow, but 1,000 small paper cuts. Vinton grew increasingly short-tempered. One night, he came into the living room while I was reading and barked, "Irma, where's the television remote?" I looked up. Startled. "It's right there on the coffee table. I asked you not to move my things." He snapped through clenched teeth. "I didn't touch anything," I whispered. But it didn't matter. The decision had already been made in his mind. I was a disruption. Tabitha changed too. Her kindness took on a patronizing edge. She monitored my meals, commented on my clothes, even corrected how I folded laundry. "Mom," she said one morning, eyeing my favorite green sweater. "That makes you look older. Wear the blue one I gave you." I changed without a word. But inside, something tightened. I'd made my own decisions for over 60 years. Suddenly, I was being treated like a child. A bourden. A guest who required constant management. Then came the conversations about money. Tabitha started reminding me about the rise in electricity bills since I moved in. I offered to help financially. Of course I did. She didn't argue. I began sending her a set amount each month. Enough to cover my share and more. Still, the mood in the house didn't improve. If anything, the tension grew. One morning over breakfast, Tabitha asked, "You're still getting Dad's pension?" "Right, yes," I replied. Caught off guard. "A portion transferred to me after he passed. And how much is that?" "If you don't mind me asking." I did mind. But I smiled and gave a vague answer. Later that week, Vinton cornered me in the kitchen. "Have you thought about what to do with the money from the house sale?" he asked casually. "It's not good to just let it sit there." "I know a guy, a financial advisor. I haven't decided," I said quickly. "But thank you." His smile was too thin, too polished. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. Their questions weren't just about curiosity or concern. They were watching my savings. For the first time, a chilling thought crept in. Maybe it wasn't kindness that brought me here. Maybe it was calculation. The blow-up didn't start with a big event. It started, as most explosions do, with something small, harmless on the surface. Dinner had been tense all week. Jasper, my teenage grandson, had turned sullen and sharp, snapping at Tabitha over everything from school rules to bedtime. I kept my distance. I'd raised my children. I knew that line between helpful and overstepping. That night, Vinton came home late and grumpy. Jasper refused to come down for dinner. Tabitha looked like a balloon about to burst. I tried to lighten the mood. "Let me handle dinner tonight," I offered gently. "You've had a long day." She hesitated. "Okay," she sighed. "But go light on the oil. Vinton's watching his cholesterol." I made baked chicken, roasted vegetables, and jasmine rice. Simple. Familiar? When we sat down, no one said a word. Rosamond tried to compliment the food, but even her cheerful voice couldn't cut through the tension. Then, it happened. As I reached for Vinton's empty plate to clear it, I accidentally knocked over his wine glass. Deep red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth and onto his light-colored pants. He shot up like I'd struck him. Damn it! These are new. I'm so sorry, I gasped, grabbing a napkin. Don't touch it, he barked, swatting my hand away. You'll make it worse. Tabitha jumped up, tugging his arm. Go change. I'll treat the stain. He stormed off, muttering under his breath. I stood frozen, my hand still tingling from where he'd slapped it away. I'm sorry. Mom, Tabitha mumbled. He's just tired. And those pants were expensive. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, I said quietly. Or buy him a new pair. No. Don't worry. As I bent to gather the broken glass, a shard nicked my finger. A small drop of blood landed on the wine-stained cloth. Mom, be careful, Tabitha snapped. Just please let me do it. I can handle a broken glass, I said, my voice flat. No one said you couldn't, she replied, brushing me aside. I stepped back, watching her clean up like I was a stranger in my own family. That night, lying in bed, one truth rang in my ears, louder than anything else. I didn't belong here. Not anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in the narrow bed that had never really felt like mine. Vinton's angry voice echoed in my mind, Tabitha's sharp tone cutting through my memories like cold scissors. You've become a burden. The words stung more than I expected. And they weren't just words, they were a window into how she really saw me. Around dry? Null a. M. I slipped out of bed, wrapped myself in my robe, and made my way into the dark kitchen. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the old wall clock ticking steadily. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, staring into the darkness outside. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was a burden. Maybe my presence had disrupted their well-oiled machine. But I hadn't come here to be a problem. I came because she asked me to. Quentin used to say my hands were always cold. Little ice cubes. He'd call them, warming them in his own. I missed him so much in that moment. I could barely breathe. He was always the calm voice, the steady hand. Now, I had to be that for myself. I took a sip of tea and started mentally listing everything I had. The house had sold for $350. Ling. After taxes and fees, I'd cleared about $300. Ling. Quentin's life insurance added another $200. Ling. And I still had my pension. Small, but stable. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't helpless either. If I managed it wisely, I could live on my own. No more helpful suggestions about sweaters. No more feeling like a trespasser in someone else's kitchen. I remembered Lorraine Pembroke Quentin's lawyer. She had helped us with his estate paperwork. And I'd always liked her. Sharp mind. Kind heart. I'd call her in the morning. I needed legal advice, financial guidance, and above all, I needed a plan. I may have been 61. I may have been widowed and lost. But I was not broken, not finished. And I certainly wasn't anyone's charity case. By the time the sun rose over Sherville, I'd made up my mind. I was going to start over. On my terms. The morning light felt different that day. Brighter. Somehow. Like it knew I had made a decision. I left the house quietly, slipping out before anyone woke. I left a simple note on the counter, out for a walk. It wasn't a lie. Just not the full truth. I headed to a little cafe on the corner and called Lorraine Pembroke. Her assistant squeezed me in for the following morning. If it's urgent, she said. It was. Afterward, I walked into the local bank. I wanted to see every penny I had. With my own eyes. The young man at the counter was polite. Patient. He printed my statements. Walked me through options. Investments. Savings accounts. Conservative portfolios. I didn't make any commitments, not yet. But I asked him to prepare brochures so I could review everything at home. Can anyone else see my account information? I asked before leaving. No. Ma'am, he replied. It's protected by law. Only you have access. That was all I needed to hear. Next, I grabbed a real estate newspaper from a street kiosk and found a bench in a small park. I sat there for over an hour, circling listings, trying to picture myself in these places. Small apartment. East side. First floor. Backyard garden. It didn't need to be fancy. It just needed to be mine. By late afternoon, I returned to Tabitha's house. Her hello was brief. Vinton didn't look up from the television. But Rosman, sweet Rosman, ran to me and hugged me tightly. Grandma, where were you? I was worried. I was just exploring the city. I smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear, seeing what's out there. I went to my room, hid the papers in a drawer, and changed into my house clothes. At dinner, I helped Rosman with her homework. I didn't say a word about my day, but inside, I was glowing. Tomorrow, I'd see Lorraine. After that, I'd start calling listings. Then the moving trucks. The lease. The paperwork. A job, maybe something small. Just to stay busy. A plan was forming. Steady and strong. I didn't tell anyone yet. Not because I was afraid, but because this time, the life I was building belonged only to me. 2 weeks passed. And with every passing day, I grew stronger and quieter. While Tabitha and Vinton went to work, I lived a second life. I toured apartments, met with Lorraine, even interviewed for a part-time job at a charming antique store. At night, I played the role of the agreeable mother, polite, quiet, invisible. The apartment I found was perfect. 2 bedrooms, a creaky wooden floor, and tall windows that let the morning light pour in. It sat on a quiet street on the east side of Sherville, tucked behind a blooming courtyard. The rent was fair. And the landlord, Mr. Archibald Wells, was kind and sincere. My daughter lived here before she moved to California. He told me while handing over the keys, the place has memories. I'm glad someone like you will be living in it. It felt right. I signed the lease, paid the deposit, and scheduled movers for the essentials: my mahogany chest, Quentin's rocking chair, and a few keepsakes that still made me feel like myself. The hardest part was deciding how to leave. I didn't want drama. I didn't want tears. And I certainly didn't want Tabitha's last-minute guilt trip. So I picked my moment carefully. Tabitha and Vinton were taking the kids on a weekend trip to visit friends in the next town over. That would give me 2 full days, enough time to leave quietly. Respectfully. The morning they left, I stood in the driveway and waved as their car disappeared down the street. Then I walked back inside and got to work. By Friday evening, the room I'd been sleeping in for months was empty. My things were gone. The memories, too. I left 2 letters on the living room table. One was for Tabitha. Dear Tabitha, I've decided to start a new chapter of my life on my own. I have a place to live. a job, and the peace I've been missing. I'm grateful for the roof you gave me when I needed it. But it's time for both of us to move on. With love. Mom. The other letter was for the grandchildren. With my new address. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. No anger, no regret. Just quiet. Steady freedom. The first night in my new apartment felt strange, like waking up in someone else's dream. The walls still smelled faintly of old paint and lavender, and the wooden floors creaked with every step. But it was mine. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was restless, but because I was awake. Fully. Deeply awake for the first time in years. No one commented on my sweater. No one turned down my offer to help. No one sighed as I made tea at midnight. I spent the next few days turning that little apartment into something that felt like home. I bought new curtains, soft blue linen, that reminded me of the sea. I picked out dishes that didn't match, but made me smile. I found a thrift store rug with faded roses that reminded me of my mother's kitchen. Little by little, it stopped feeling like a rental and started feeling like a sanctuary. I also turned off my phone. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want arguments. I needed space not to escape, but to rebuild. Still, I knew the silence wouldn't last. 3 days after the move, my new neighbor, Mr. Wells, knocked on my door with a plate of warm scones. Lovely to have you here. Irma. He smiled. Then his voice lowered. A woman came by asking about you. Said she was your daughter. I didn't tell her anything. I thanked him deeply. His kindness felt like a blanket I hadn't realized I needed. The next day, my phone rang. Muriel, Tabitha's looking for you, she said without preamble. She's been calling everyone. I left her a letter. I replied calmly. She has my words. That's all she needs right now. She says it's about documents. Something urgent. I didn't respond. I already knew what she was talking about, my will. Lorraine had updated everything. I'd made my decisions. And now, Tabitha was panicking. But I wasn't. That afternoon, I sat in my new kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea and a quiet heart. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. This life was mine. Every decision, every sunrise, every cup of tea. And I intended to live it fully without apology. It happened at the grocery store of all places. I was reaching for a bag of apples when I heard her voice behind me. There you are. I froze. Then slowly turned. Tabitha. She looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were darker than I remembered. Hi, Tabitha, I said softly, placing an apple in my basket. Is that all you have to say? She snapped. After disappearing for a month, I left a note. I replied evenly, and I gave Rosman my address. You left without warning. You vanished. I took a breath. Would you like to talk somewhere else? This isn't the place. She nodded sharply. There's a Starbucks around the corner. 15 minutes, all right. 15 minutes later, I walked in to find her already seated with 2 coffees on the table. I got you an Americano, she said. Thanks, I replied. Even though I would have preferred tea. We sat in silence for a moment. Why? Mom, she finally asked, her voice low. Why did you do this? Because I needed air. I said, because I couldn't breathe in your house anymore. Tabitha looked away. I was stressed. Okay, between work and the kids, and it wasn't just stress. I interrupted. It was control. It was disrespect. It was making me feel like I didn't belong. She exhaled sharply. You think you were the only one hurting? No, I said. But I was the only one being treated like furniture. Moved around. Spoken over. Tolerated. She sat back. Arms crossed. So you ran away, changed your will, left us in the dark. You didn't leave me much choice. Her eyes narrowed. So it's true. You changed the will. I nodded slowly. Yes. And I had every right to. This is petty, she said bitterly. After everything we've done for you? No. I said gently. It's not about punishment. It's about freedom. I gave up everything to be with you. And you treated me like an obligation. I won't live like that. Tabitha stared at me. Speechless. I'm not angry, I added. But I am done being quiet. I stood, leaving the coffee untouched. I'll call when I'm ready, I told her. And I walked out lighter with every step. Time passed quickly. Like the turning pages of a good book. Winter melted into spring. And Sherville bloomed with fresh colors. So did I. The antique shop became more than just a job. It was a place of connection. Mr. Dobson gave me more responsibility. I started documenting the stories behind certain pieces, sharing them with customers who loved knowing the history behind what they were buying. I signed up for photography classes at the community center, something Quentin always wanted me to do. There, I met Eleanor, a retired librarian who'd also lost her husband. We bonded quickly over our shared love of nature photography and slowly built a small circle of friends. We weren't trying to relive our youth, we were building something new. Saturday visits from Rosman became my favorite part of the week. We baked cookies, painted with watercolors, and watched black and white movies on my old television. She never once asked why I left, she just accepted me. Loved me. That was enough. Surprisingly, Jasper started visiting too. Quiet at first. Distant. But he was drawn to my small collection of antique pocket watches. One day, as he turned one over in his hand, he whispered, "This is actually kinda cool." That was the beginning. Tabitha still called sometimes. She left messages. Some apologetics. Some defensive. I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't angry anymore, but I had nothing left to prove. Then, one summer evening, Mr. Wells knocked on my door and asked, "Ever thought about buying this place?" I blinked. "Buy it, I'm thinking of moving closer to my sister in Arizona." He said, "You've made this place come alive again. I'd rather it go to someone who loves it." I told him I'd think about it. And I did. Long and hard. Then I called Lorraine and told her, "Let's do it." That evening, I sat in the garden with a cup of tea. The sky glowing orange as the sun dipped low. Jazz floated in from a neighbor's window. My roses were blooming. The world was quiet. I wasn't anyone's guest anymore. I wasn't someone's burden or responsibility. I was home. At 61. I hadn't reached the end of the story. I'd just begun the most honest chapter of my life, and this time, I was writing it for me.